Here's a question that should keep you up at night. What if democracy doesn't die with a bang, but with a whimper? We're used to dramatic coups and tanks in the streets, but what if democracy just fades away? One law at a time, one court appointment at a time, one silenced journalist at a time. Right now, across Europe and beyond, democracy isn't being overthrown. It's being dismantled piece by piece, often by democratically elected leaders themselves. It seems like a paradox, right? From Poland to Hungary to Serbia to Georgia to Tunisia and to Egypt. Countries that were supposed to be democracy's success stories are sliding backward. Today, we're exploring how democracy dies in the 21st century, the warning signs appearing across Europe and beyond, and what we can actually do about it. Before we dive in, let's address the elephant in the room. What is democracy? It is a surprisingly tricky question. Here's the truth. There's no single definition. If you ask 10 political scientists, you'll get 11 different answers. While we might argue about what perfect democracy looks like, we can all recognize what it definitely isn't. Think of democracy like your health. You might not define perfect health, but you know when you're getting sick. Right now, democracy across Europe and beyond is showing worrying symptoms. Authoritarian practices are getting more and more common in democracies. This we might call democratic backsliding. Democracy requires 5 pillars: processes, institutions, participation, accountability, pluralism. Democratic backsliding happens when these 5 pillars are undermined. So let's do a diagnosis. Here are 5 warning signs that democracy is dying. Democracy means all citizens can participate in the system, vote, speak, assemble, and challenge policies through courts. When governments start removing these fundamental participation rights or bypass normal democratic procedures to strip rights from any group, alarm bells should ring. This is one of the most common tactics. A crisis happens, governments grant themselves emergency powers. What's not normal is when those powers never go away. Hungary and Turkey show this pattern. Orbán used COVID-19 to grant himself unlimited powers to rule by decree. The pandemic ended, but the powers didn't. Erdogan declared emergency after the 2016 coup attempt. It lasted nearly 2 years. Over 150,000 arrested, thousands of academics and judges dismissed, hundreds of media outlets shut down. Even after it ended, the emergency powers became permanent law. When peaceful protest itself becomes a crime, democracy is in serious danger. And there are many examples of protest being banned more and more. Of course, not all bans are automatically democratic backsliding. Also, democracies can restrict some rights. For example, many countries limit hate speech. The difference here is that these bans are done through democratic processes. They can be challenged in courts, and they don't silence political opposition. The real question: if you disagree with government policy, can you organize, protest, vote them out, and challenge it in court? When the answer shifts from yes to no, that's when democracy is backsliding. Another warning sign of backsliding is when accountability disappears. Various country examples show what this looks like. A railway station in Novi Sad collapses, killing 15 people. It had just been renovated. What should have triggered investigations got swept under the rug. There was no accountability from the government, contracts were sealed, questions ignored, and protesters were met with water cannons and arrests. This is part of a larger pattern. Serbia's corruption score continues to decline under President Vucic's rigid control. Opaque interstate agreements, special legislation for mega projects with weak anti-corruption measures, executive domination over institutions. When governments use force to hide corruption instead of investigating it, you're not living in a democracy anymore. This isn't just one country. It is a pattern seen in more and more countries in Europe and elsewhere. Accountability is essential to democracy. When it degrades, so does democracy itself. Or when governments use force to hide corruption, you're not living in a democracy anymore. But there's another side to the story. An example of hope can be found in Albania. Albania's special anti-corruption prosecutors are prosecuting former ministers and high-ranking officials. It shows that strong, independent institutions can work when protected from political interference. Luckily, Albania is not the only example. The question: can other countries replicate these successes? It requires political will to create truly independent institutions with real power, and then the courage not to interfere when they investigate those in power. Another sign of democratic backsliding can be seen in the judicial system. Independent judges are democracy's referees. But what happens when politicians choose their own referees? Tunisia shows us what goes wrong. After the 2011 revolution that sparked the Arab Spring, Tunisia was hailed as the region's democratic success story. But President Kais Saied systematically dismantled judicial independence, dismissing judges, dissolving the Supreme Judicial Council, and placing courts under presidential control. When courts lose their independence, everything falls apart. Opposition figures arrested on vague charges, journalists detained without fair trials, and democratic reforms are blocked because loyalist judges rule them unconstitutional. The very courts that should protect citizens from government abuse become tools of that abuse. This is what a politicized judiciary looks like: courts that serve power instead of justice. The Trump administration shows another approach, stacking courts with loyalists. While judicial appointments are legal and normal, the scale and speed, combined with public pressure on judges to rule in his favor and attacks on those who don't, undermines judicial independence. Trump has openly stated he expects his judges to rule in his favor, fundamentally misunderstanding or deliberately undermining what judicial independence means. But also here, there's hope. Moldova is fighting to reverse this exact problem. After years of corrupt, oligarch-controlled judiciary, the government is attempting genuine judicial reform, vetting judges, creating integrity checks, pushing out corrupt officials. Still, there is a catch-22. Reforming a corrupt judiciary requires changing the system. And changing the system looks a lot like politicizing it. Moldova is walking a tightrope, strong enough to break the old corrupt system, but restrained enough not to create a new autocracy. The lesson? Losing judicial independence is easy. Getting it back is incredibly hard. Democracy needs free information. However, across Europe and beyond, governments are controlling what you can read, watch, and share. This can be another sign of democratic backsliding, when free press is democracy's watchdog, but it's being transformed into a government megaphone. Georgia's public broadcaster is supposed to be funded by citizen license fees, making it independent. In practice, the government influences everything. And when Georgia passed its Foreign Agents Law in 2024 targeting media and NGOs, the message was clear: fall in line or face consequences. Compare this to independent public broadcasting. While no system is perfect, strong public broadcasters in democracies maintain editorial independence precisely because they're protected from government interference through proper institutional safeguards. While countries might restrict some online content, where does legitimate restriction end and censorship begin? For example, Kosovo has restricted access to Serbian websites, claiming security concerns during tensions. Is this legitimate protection or censorship? Russia leaves no ambiguity. Thousands of websites blocked. Fake news laws criminalize truth. Social media is forced to censor or leave, and journalists imprisoned for social media posts. Here's the nuance. Certain information is not allowed to be distributed also in democracies. So it's a tightrope. You want to forbid certain things to stop bad actors, but you also want to keep it as open as possible. The key questions: are restrictions applied transparently through democratic processes? Can they be challenged in independent courts? Do multiple, diverse information sources still exist? And can you use multiple sources to understand the full story? If the answer is increasingly no to these type of questions, then it is not a healthy way of fighting disinformation, but democratic backsliding. Whether it's state-controlled TV, blocked websites, or banned books, when governments control information, they control reality itself. Without access to different views, and when public media become cheerleaders rather than watchdogs, democracy is in serious trouble. The ultimate sign democracy is dead when opposing the government becomes impossible, either because it's literally a crime or because the system is rigged so thoroughly that opposition can't win. Belarus didn't slide into authoritarianism, it sprinted. After fraudulent 2020 elections, tens of thousands were arrested. Opposition leaders imprisoned or exiled, and entire parties banned. Or in Egypt's 2023 election, where authorities arrested and intimidated activists and opposition supporters. And the most prominent challenger was forced to end his campaign after failing to meet onerous requirements. President Sisi won with 89.6%. Now, doesn't that sound too good to be true? Here's authoritarianism's genius. It's all technically legal. Elections still happen. Parliament meets, but here democracy is theater, where everyone knows the finale before the show begins. I mean, look at the communist states of the Cold War. Would you call them democratic? Most still held elections. They even had almost 100% approval from citizens. But it was all a show. There was no real choice. Some countries don't follow the Belarusian sprint. They use a more subtle strategy. You don't have to imprison opposition, just make it impossible for them to win through media manipulation, registration barriers, gerrymandering, and campaign finance rules favoring incumbents. This is the dictator's dream. Keep the appearance of democracy while ensuring it can never threaten your power. You can vote, but your vote doesn't really matter. Your options are participate in democracy, theater, or face consequences. An important note here again is that not all interference or hurdles are authoritarian. In Germany, extremist anti-democratic parties have been banned, and Britain's electoral system makes it nearly impossible for new parties to win. Yet, are Germany and the UK authoritarian? No. The essential difference is that in these countries the opposition can still function. The decisions can be challenged and are checked by independent courts. I know this has been heavy, but here's the thing. Democracy doesn't die when autocrats attack it. Democracy dies when citizens stop defending it. So, what can you actually do? Vote. Every single time. Poland's 2025 presidential election was decided by just 350,000 votes. That's the margin between democracy and authoritarianism. Every election matters. Local, national, European. High turnout makes fraud harder and shows citizens are paying attention. Never accept the unacceptable. This is one of the key points. With all the nuances and tightropes described above, the difference is that in a democracy, you can freely address any issue you see. You can discuss it openly, criticize, hold accountable, or try to, without facing consequences. Autocrats win when the large, good majority stands by and watches in silence. Support independent media. Subscribe, donate, share. Authoritarian governments attack free press first for a reason. Independent journalism is democracy's early warning system. Hold everyone accountable, including your side. Democracy requires principles above partisanship. Free speech isn't just for people you agree with. Judicial independence isn't just important when the other party is in power. Talk about it. Don't just reject democratic backsliding privately, talk about it publicly. Every conversation that refuses to normalize the abnormal is a small act of resistance. Think beyond borders. Democratic backsliding in one place negatively affects democracy everywhere. Autocrats cooperate actively, Orbán and Lukashenko share strategies, so democracy's defenders need to cooperate too. Democracy isn't a fixed state, it's a constant choice. Every day, every election, every time you decide whether to speak up or stay silent. The autocrats want you to think you're powerless because nothing threatens authoritarian power more than engaged citizens who refuse to give up. So here's the real question. What kind of world do you want to live in? The question isn't whether democracy is in danger. It is. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Want to learn more? Subscribe for more Voltaire explainers. Share this with someone who needs to see it. And most importantly, the story of democracy isn't finished.